Wow. This place looks important. You know, places like this inspire me because they make me think about what I could have been if I was a good student. But I have found something that could translate anyone into a good student, and it's the idea of self-presentation. Now, before I get into this, I hate the idea of one-way communication, so if at any point you feel you've got a question, feel free to jump in, raise your hand, throw your shoe, whatever it is to get my attention. I understand as well that the vast majority of people here speak Polish. I happen to speak exactly 2 words in Polish, and I understand these words universally. So if you don't understand, just say, I guess the Polish people would say, nie rozumiem. And then I'll find somebody in the crowd and awkwardly force them to translate what I just said. Is that a deal? Perfect, perfect. So, self-presentation, let's start with a simple question. A question that will kind of encapsulate what we're going to be talking about today. What do you think about me? Young, handsome, looks like James Bond, Will Smith, cocky, full of himself, arrogant, talks too much. You see, all of us have only one opportunity to set a first impression. And unfortunately, we're communicating so often that people are formulating ideas about us every waking moment of the day. So when people hear self-presentation, or when they hear the world champion of public speaking is going to come and talk about self-presentation, there's a temptation to think that this is going to be a workshop about public speaking. Now, be honest, how many people thought this is a workshop about public speaking? There we go. Don't worry, been there, done that, have the t-shirt. The truth is, titles like self-presentation make us think about that, and that doesn't lend too well to what self-presentation actually is. And what is self-presentation? Well, self-presentation is a much more universal concept. Like I said earlier on, we are presenting ourselves more often than we realize. We're presenting ourselves in an interview when we're trying to get that job. Yeah, we're presenting ourselves, of course, when we stand in front of people and communicate an idea. We're presenting ourselves when we're on a date, and we're trying to convince that person to give us a second date, or to go away, whichever one we want. We are even presenting ourselves when we're doing something as menial as walking down the road. Now, historically, I have conducted an experiment with the individuals I coach, and we've got a street in Wrocław, it's called Świdnicka. Probably in every city there's a Świdnicka somewhere if you look hard enough. Now, Świdnicka in Wrocław is about 150 meters long, about 150, 200. And I asked my coachees to walk down Świdnicka on a really busy day and to see if they can get people to avoid bumping shoulders with them. It's very interesting. Without talking to anybody, convince them to get out of your way. Now, many people have different strategies. Some people just walk really quickly so that it looks like they're in a rush. Other people do what I know now to be the Polish bodybuilder, and that's basically when they walk like this. For some reason it works sometimes, but it confirms that idea that we are presenting ourselves more often than we realize, and that's why self-presentation is very important. That's why this topic is very important. So if self-presentation is not public speaking, if self-presentation is all-encompassing, how can we properly define self-presentation in a practical way that everybody can use? What self-presentation actually is a series of habits. Habits that capture how people perceive us. Now, I love this definition because so many times when I work with people who want to learn public speaking, I hear excuses such as, oh, I'm an introvert. How will I ever stand in front of people and talk? So many people think that just because you're quiet-ish, it's difficult to become a public speaker. Then I say, fine. Let's not learn public speaking. Let's learn self-presentation. Because anybody can learn new habits. anybody can master new habits, and so by extension, everybody can learn how to present themselves convincingly. Now, of course, for us to present ourselves convincingly, for us to give a positive image of ourselves, we need to know what we're working with. And typically, this is where the overlap happens. This is why so many people believe that self-presentation and public speaking are one and the same thing. While they overlap, it's not necessarily true that they're one and the same thing, but they have commonalities. For example, just like in the world of public speaking, we work with content, structure, and delivery. If you've got those three nailed, you can probably give a good speech. What if I said the same applies to self-presentation? The foundation, of course, is content. It's always content, because if you've got no value to offer in terms of content, then nobody has any reason to listen to you, yes? Structure gives structure. It's what tells you that this is a house and not a hill. And if we can't structure what we say, we can't incentivize people to listen. And of course, delivery is what covers all of it. In a speech, outside a speech. In a presentation, in a conversation. On stage, in an interview, these concepts are universal. Now, it's true that even though there is this skeleton, all of us will still develop our own style. In different parts of the world, houses look different, but you would still call it a house, albeit different. Now, each and every one of you will have different styles of presenting yourself, but it's good to remember that the core is the same. And that's why I argue again, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or you don't like people at all, or you don't talk at all, or you've never talked at all, which is concerning, you can still develop a style to present yourself convincingly. Now, let's talk about the first one, content. Okay, Cyril, self-presentation, not public speaking, but content is involved. What would you rather do? Again, let's be honest, yeah? You've got the choice of, what happened to my slide? Let's go back. You took my slide away. Well, I'll ask the question anyway. What would you rather do? Watch a movie or listen to a lecture? I hear movies. How many people here are for the movies? Oh, wow. The future is bright. So you'd rather watch a movie rather than listen to a lecture. It's very interesting. Why? By the way, Hollywood absolutely agrees with you. Hollywood knows this, and that's why the movie industry makes what it makes. And you may have gotten a hint of why that's so. It's because Hollywood has tapped into that. Telling stories. Now, telling stories is a universal concept that dates back as far as human beings have been around. Telling stories is one of the earliest ways we collected history. Oral tradition is what would be passed down generations. So universally, a human being relates more to stories than they do to a simple lecture or narration of facts. Now, probably there are some lecturers in here, and maybe this is a bit of a turning point, or at least something to think about. Would your students relate more to your material if it was wrapped around a story? Now, why a story is so impactful is that, first of all, nobody has your worldview. Nobody has lived your life. Nobody has any idea what you've experienced, what you've seen, where you've been. Where does the problem come along? Well, the first problem is that not enough of us realize when we have an opportunity to tell a story. So for example, you're in an interview and they ask you, why do you think you're qualified for this job? Now, how many of us have fallen into the trap of saying, well, I'm hardworking, I'm qualified, I graduated, and I promised to stay after hours, and I love this job, I'm very passionate, I'm very driven, and that's why I'm a good fit for this job. Maybe it's a good answer, but is it the best? Put yourself in that same situation, and the interviewer asks you, why do you believe you're a good fit for the job? And you look that interviewer in the eye and you say, well, 3 years ago, I was in a similar position in a much smaller company. I never thought I'd find myself doing such work, and to be honest, I made plenty of mistakes. If I'm being honest, my mistakes were the reason I got fired. But I've had 5 years to think back to that experience, to apply myself, and to fix the mistakes I made back then. That's why I feel qualified for this job. If you had 2 candidates, one who told a story and one who called themselves hardworking, my question is, which one is more memorable? The second guy. Why? Stories are a universal language that we've spoken forever, and so they're more relatable. The third problem that we experience with stories is that we don't have a system of collecting them. Many people think you need to live a very tragic life or a very interesting life, or you need to climb Mount Everest, or you need to be shot at least once to have good stories. Now, if I put you on the spot right now and said, tell me a story now, you'd be like, oh. Right? Unless you've got a really good story right now. Do you have a good story right now? No? See, I'm right. What's your name? Piotr, thank you very much. So what can we do to fix this problem? We think we don't have interesting stories. We don't have a system of collecting stories. Matthew Dix, he's one of my favorite authors on the topic of storytelling, and he assigns what is known as the homework for life. And he argues anybody can do this. At the end of each day, take out 5 minutes. You can afford 5 minutes. And answer one question. Maybe you write down the answer somewhere. If I had to tell one story from today, if I had to describe the most story-worthy moment from today, what would that story be? And write the answer in 1 sentence, no more, maybe 4 sentences max, but 1 sentence is ideal. What this exercise does is, first of all, it helps you capture stories as they happen, but second of all, it will remind you of similar stories that you've encountered in the past. And just like that, you've got a bank of stories that you can pull whenever appropriate. Now, storytelling is a habit that we need to pick up. Why? Because storytelling is a universally understood language, and it makes it easy for people to remember us. What we need to start learning as well as an accompanying habit is finding an opportunity to respond with a story. So if you're to take anything from this, how can I find an opportunity to respond with a story? Now, of course, still under content, this is one last bit I'd like us to think about. Does anybody here have the problem of talking too much? Yeah? Don't worry, me too. Me too. I talk so much. My own voice annoys me. What has helped me is to think about this, to think about the message, to think about what exactly it is I'm talking about. Because usually talking too much is what happens when we have so many tangential ideas going in every direction and we don't stop ourselves. But if we know what the message is and we stick to the message, you find that as a result, you tend to speak less. Why? Because you want everyone to focus on the message. In the realm of public speaking, if you want to borrow another concept, we say less is more. Sometimes the person who speaks less on one message is easier to relate to, is easier to remember. You can apply this in conversation as well. Accompanying this is the idea that in as much as self-presentation is about what we say, sometimes in order to bring clarity to the message, we need to focus on moments when we don't say anything. Which means that some of the best presenters I know, on stage or off stage, they know how to use silence to highlight ideas, to make people think, to sound a bit dramatic. Seems to work. So that's an idea we want to keep when it comes to content. 2 things. First of all, storytelling. Learn telling stories as a habit. Learn to tell stories. Respond with a story. And the second one, make sure every time you speak, you have a single clear message to leave on to people. Makes it easier to remember you. Now, let's talk about structure. Let's talk about incentivizing people to listen. Here's the thing, if we don't have good structure when we're engaging with people, Either they pull out their phones or they find an excuse to leave. And so many of us are terrified of this, right? We don't want to be boring. And even if you do have something very important to say, but your structure is poor, then guess what? People will remember it for 3 minutes, maybe 3 hours, but definitely not for 3 days. So what can we do? What can we do? What can we do in terms of structure to incentivize listening? Now let's go back to movies. Since everybody here says that they love movies, how many people can tell me what movie this is? You ready? First person to say this gets something. I'll think about it. So it's morning. You listening? First person to name this movie. The mother wakes up next to the father. They say good morning to each other. The father says, you look lovely. You need to shout. You can't raise your hand. You need to shout. The father says, you look lovely. The wife says, I know. They go downstairs. The kids have done their homework. The mother makes pancakes and coffee. The father reads the newspaper. They're sitting around the table. The dog is underneath the table, wagging its tail, begging for food. And then dad takes the kids to the car, and then they drive off to school. And then at school, the kids pay attention, submit their homework, learn. Dad goes to work to make $1 million. Wifey is at home because daddy makes $1 million. And then at the end of the day, the kids get on the... Nobody knows this movie? You need to shout. What is that movie? What? What is it? What's the movie? No, this is not every movie that's made in America. It's, you ready for the answer? Anybody else who wants to guess what this movie is? But you're close, America. There is no such movie. I'm sorry. It's not that movie. Do you know why? Because if in the first 5 minutes, right, the kids are eating breakfast and there's coffee and they all love each other, then in your head you're like, something needs to happen as they're going to school. And if nothing happens at school, then you're like, something needs to happen when dad is going to work. And if nothing happens throughout the entire movie, then you ask for a refund. Do you know why? And this is about structure. You want people to listen, right? You want them to say, and what next? And what next? You want them to do that. Or this. Where does it start? It always starts with a problem. If you want people to listen, anywhere, on stage, off stage, give them something that needs to be solved later. Because we're curious and we like drama, right? And remember what we said about content. We said, tell stories. Well, there's a perfect opportunity there. Because after you give them a problem, give them the story of the problem. I remember some of my fondest classes in biology, and I don't work in the medical sciences. I remember them because the professor would tell the story of the problem. He's like, Cyril, one day, 200 years from now, or 199, you're going to have wrinkles on your face. And I said, no. He said, you're right. Somebody else will have wrinkles. But Cyril, we were looking into why this happens. We were investigating it, and we understood that DNA replicates. And I said, yeah. The problem is, at the end of DNA, you know how your shoelace has a little eggnog at the end? I said, uh-huh. He says, DNA has the same thing. It's called a telomere. And as the replication of DNA continues, I'm like, huh? The telomere replicates less and less perfectly. I said, oh. And he said, that's why you age. And Cyril, if we can fix the problem of imperfect telomere replication, then Cyril, you will look young forever. I said, whoa, what are we gonna do? He said, I don't know. You see what happens? Starts with a problem. Cyril, you're going to grow old. Then he tells the story of the problem. We discovered this when we were analyzing DNA. And then he explains what DNA looks like. I don't even use DNA. I remember it to this day. This is the kind of structure that can make people listen. Start with something that needs to be solved. Give them the story of how you discovered the problem. Now, of course, many of you here are visionaries. You are the future. You are what I am jealous of. You are good students. So you probably have a lot of solutions. If people are hungry enough because of the problem, because of the story of the problem, then people are going to be more receptive to your solution. And then, of course, you can propose some action. Hollywood knows this so much, this is every movie. If there's no problem at the beginning, you're like, what's wrong with this movie? I watched for 30 minutes and I didn't enjoy it. And if there's no great solution to the problem, then what do? You wait for part 2. You're like, there is still a problem. We need a solution. You can apply the same strategy and propose that people take action, and your structure will always compel people to listen. Now, of course, remember what we said? Style. This is only one template, one skeleton, a very basic one. And very advanced communicators have learned that there are different approaches to this. If you watch TEDx, then you're going to know that perhaps they don't always follow this template. Maybe they change it up just a bit. But the truth remains that if we give people a structure that they can follow, very likely they want to hear more. Now let's talk about where we don't start. And this applies strictly to settings like this, when we are in front of people. This is a common problem. Now maybe you're going to be defending your thesis one day, or you're going to be speaking in front of the UN, or wherever good students speak. Here are some minor habits you might think of removing. Hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about, in settings such as these, somebody has already introduced you. If people are sitting like this, they probably know what you're going to speak about. Get to the point. In other cases, well, you're on Zoom, you're online. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you see my slides? Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But remember, self-presentation is about influencing how they perceive you. Test your equipment before. When it's time to speak, you know your slides are working. You know they can hear you. You know they can see you. It takes a little extra effort, but it can change everything about the way people perceive you. You're on Zoom, you're presenting something, get to the point. Maybe, I'm sorry. If we were mad at you as the audience, we would have left. Now maybe we are slightly mad at you, but do you know how you can fix that? By getting to the point. And last but not least, let me tell you a funny story. Get to the point. Tell the funny story, and let us decide if it's funny or not. It's usually not. But you get the point with how structure works. Structure is about incentivizing, giving people a reason to listen. And there are a few very easy ways you could do that. Get to the point, explain the point, restate the point, ask people to act on the point. An introvert can do this, an extrovert can do this, all of us can do this, and it will change the way people perceive us at work, at school, anywhere at all. Now let's talk about the last tool that I'd like to discuss in self-presentation, delivery. Delivery is an interesting one because it is deeply rooted in psychology. It's deeply rooted in elements of our culture. But what is it at the core? It's a bunch of habits. It's a really big bunch of habits. And if we can learn the elements involved in delivery, we can catch the bad habits and we can turn them into good habits. Now, many people might think of, well, what we do when we're nervous. Yeah? Let me explain that, what we do when we're nervous. How many people here, when they're nervous, rock back and forth? Yeah? How many? You can show with your hands. If you're nervous, you kind of need to rock back and forth to, yeah, that's you. Do you know where that comes from? Do you remember when you were a baby? What does mama do when you're crying? She'll rock you back and forth. So in the back of your head, rocking back and forth is a comforting mechanism. Other things that we do, if you've got a paper or if you've got your notes somewhere, then suddenly you hide behind them essentially. Why? Because psychologically, when your body is under threat, it knows to protect the vital organs. That's why, if you watch crime dramas, where do they find defensive wounds on crime victims? Here, right, on the hands. Why? Because when we defend ourselves, the instinct is to do this. The same applies. Your heart is here, your kidneys are here. The body subconsciously knows to try and defend these parts when you feel scared. Now, the opposite is true. When you're under the effect of adrenaline, adrenaline is known as what? Fight or flight. So if we're under fright, yes, we want to defend ourselves, we become smaller. But if we want to fight, how many people here have this? When you're nervous, you become hyperactive. So you're on stage and you suddenly... Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to talk about... It works the exact same way. Again, understanding the roots of body language is understanding that what we do or what we physically express is a bunch of habits that we can master, that we can learn, that we can change. Starting right here. I want you to watch this. Where you're sitting right now, sit confidently. This is the most active you've been in the entire presentation. Interesting, right? Subconsciously, your body chooses comfort. But confidence and comfort don't always look the same. Have you noticed from this? When I say sit confidently, sometimes it means you have to sacrifice your comfortable posture. Remember what we said about self-presentation? You are presenting yourself every waking moment. It means that sitting confidently, standing confidently, walking confidently is a habit. And it's something we need to learn if we're going to present ourselves more confidently. If we're going to stand with conviction, we need to stand on our own weight. But what else? There are 3 tiny elements that you can investigate on your own if you want to present with power, if you want to master delivery. The first thing I want to do, the next time you have the opportunity to speak in front of people, I want you to get a recording. Yes, get a recording of yourself speaking in front of people. Watch the recording later, but turn off the audio. Turn off the audio and just watch how you behave without audio. That is going to help you form what is known as your visual image. When there's no external stimulus of sound or anything, you're going to notice that perhaps when I speak, I stoop a bit, or I lean on one leg, or maybe I walk too much, or maybe I use my hands a lot. You're going to notice I never smiled. I was only looking down, or I was only looking here because this is where my wife was sitting and these other people are scaring me. Form a visual image, and you can immediately make a list of habits to change. The second thing to do seems really intuitive. If you've done this, the same video, flip the phone on its face and just listen. Listen to how you sound when you speak. That's going to be your auditory image. How do I intonate? How does my voice sound when I speak? How fast, how quickly am I speaking? Do I pause at all? Am I struggling with the language? Am I struggling with the pronunciation? Your auditory image is you understanding yourself minus the visual element. And again, if you listen to the way you speak, you can make a list of habits to change. Last but not least, AI is a friend. That same video, get a transcription of it, word for word. In these 5 minutes, here are the words you said. There are many AI tools you can use to do that. And you're going to make a transcription, and it's going to tell you exactly what choice of words you decided on. But importantly, that's going to help you identify what are known as filler words. You know, you use these words when, like, you know, you have to, like, you know, filler words, and how often you use them. It's a habit, and you can list it down. The number of times you say, and so forth. The transcription will catch that. Using filler words, not being decisive with your words, is a habit. And if you can catch it, you can change it. Now, With these tools I've just described, mastering how you use content, learning how to have a good structure and delivery, you can only go so far if you're just hearing them from a speaker on stage. Even though I said self-presentation and public speaking are not one and the same thing, there are still some commonalities. And here I can, again, like we said, it comes back to habits, but I can quote Dale Carnegie, who said that, no one can learn to speak in public without speaking in public. Same way you can't learn how to swim without getting in the water. All of what I've told you today are things that I have had to learn over a career of over a decade. You can start the learning right now if you haven't started doing so already. Dale Carnegie continues that you could read every volume ever written on public speaking. You could listen to every world champion that is still alive, and you would still not know how to present yourself with confidence. Because the key element is getting involved, getting yourself in the mix, going out there, failing, but failing forward. And that's why I believe it's very important to invest in self-presentation. If not at an individual level, then at an academic level. This should be a part of your curriculum. This should be part of what you're taught before they send you out there in the world. Now, I work as a key account manager, and my work stretches into the United States, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. I have hiring responsibilities, and for me, the saddest story is when on paper I can see the candidate is qualified. But when I sit down and talk to him, they don't know how to talk about themselves. They don't know how to carry themselves. Of course, the pressure is understandable, but my goodness, what a tragedy it is. And that's why I believe that even in school, before they send you out there, learning how to present yourself convincingly should be a part of the curriculum. Now, I'm more of a doer than a talker, and that's why in Wrocław, where I live right now, we have launched incentives with 2 universities for a 15-week course on principles of speaking so that people want to listen. We go into elements of public speaking, but we go beyond. We talk about every aspect of the moments when attention is on you. Many times it's on stage, plenty more times it's off stage. Of course, perhaps some of you know about societies that help people to develop in terms of communication. Perhaps some of you have heard of Toastmasters International. Very easy sandbox to learn how to network, how to speak in front of people, how to speak to people. But the core principle is you will not master presenting yourself if you don't get involved in spaces where you can present yourself. And that's why we should invest in self-presentation. Now, for those of you that might be inclined to do so, all of our efforts are online. We're very happy when people follow along on the journey. So take a look and see what it can do, what it has done for others to invest in this exact skill set, and think seriously about what it could mean for you, for your education, and for your future to master elements of self-presentation. Now remember, in summary, for those of you who may not have been taking notes, it's a very simple toolbox. What you say, how you structure it, and how you deliver it can change everything about how people perceive you. This is a simple secret of self-presentation. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you very much.